We'll give folks a minute, but it's a great day. We're actually getting some heat here in San Diego, so
Oh, nice.
heat and humidity. Summer, I guess summer, right? There?
It's always hot in Atlanta.
Sounds like a TV show.
Yeah.
Oh, uh, all right. Great. Well, yeah, let's jump right into it. So yeah, it's great to be here today. Um, we've got a great session focusing on Salesforce Shield, specifically event monitoring. It's highly relevant given how folks like yourselves are using Salesforce, the types of data that you have, the type of interoperability of that data with other systems, along with some things that are happening in the market related to bad actors and insiders and others trying to leverage that data, and shiny hunters being one kind of that's gained a lot of prominence over the last 12 months. And so it's highly relevant. It's been highly relevant for a while, and it continues to be highly relevant based on kind of the market's slowness and really dealing with some of the underlying challenges that they have. And so cool to see so much interest from the audience here today. Really going to focus on kind of Salesforce Shield and go into some of the challenges with some of the legacy implementations, why they're not working, and why Shiny Hunters continues to have success in terms of breaches. So it's not a new concept, but it still exists. And now that we're in 2026, we need to talk about it from the lens of a 2026 view. Sadly, not as much progress has been made by many customers as one would have hoped. And that's true for even those that acquire Salesforce Shield. So recognizing that you own the responsibility for the data in your orgs, recognizing that you own responsibility for how you configure your orgs, how you monitor and manage security of those orgs. That's a great first start. Adding on the additional capabilities that Salesforce provides, specifically with Shield, that provides Event Monitor that provides critical log information of activity is really important. And actually deploying those capabilities in an effective manner and operationalizing it is kind of where the gap is for many customers. And so for today, we're going to go through some of those experiences, the things that we hear, signs that you might have a failed implementation or an implementation that was done X years ago that hasn't been updated based on changes in how you use Salesforce, changes in your user community, changes in the integration structure, those types of things. And hopefully everyone will get a couple of nuggets that they can take away back to their organization and help them make progress. From a logistics standpoint, we're going to spend about 25 minutes. We'll keep this interactive. And I'll monitor the Q&A. We'll save some time at the end for Q&A and then give everyone back their time. And should anyone want to go deeper, obviously, we've got a partnership with Arovy and Spotlight Monitor. Check us out. Check our websites, LinkedIn. We're happy to go deeper with anyone who cares about these problems. And with that, I think that's the intro. With that, Jack, Jack, great to spend time with you on this topic. Obviously, we both care deeply about. For those that weren't on some of the previous sessions, a quick intro would be helpful for them.
I think in some of the previous sessions we had talked about how Salesforce was experiencing some breaches and specific incidents due to uh, third-party connected applications granting or being compromised, and OAuth tokens being basically being stolen and being used in order to extract entire CRM instances. And so that specifically refers to the shiny hunters that you see in that box there. But yeah, I think over the summer we've continued to see more breaches happen, more Salesforce data extracted. Salesforce is obviously doing a lot on their end to try and contain it, but it will continue to be a risk vector until there is much more widespread adoption of the tooling that's out there to protect teams. So that's the shiny hunters half.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah, and maybe the other thing that that we continue to see is misconfigurations, and maybe Jack, to your point, and there's the Aura Experience Cloud was an example. This is a known
Mhm.
misconfiguration that has been around for several years that Shiny Hunters, just attacked at scale with AI, another 400 customers, and so the risk surfaces are still there. And Jack, what's your sense maybe for those that weren't on the previous sessions? What's your sense on how Shiny Hunters is thinking about this? Like it seems like they've identified some vulnerabilities. Some of them are systemic, and
Mhm.
they're applying scale to take advantage of them. Like if you were them, or maybe what's your sense and what you've heard of, how are they thinking about this? And is this recurring, or are these point in time things that happened, and then the dust settles and there's no recurrence and kind of nothing to see, nothing to do, like for those that are aren't as deeply familiar with it.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this for, gosh, almost a year and a half, 2 years at this point, and it continues to happen. Now, what I think we see, right, is like there's a spike. They will go in, they'll steal data, and then they'll go quiet for a while, and they'll wait for the next vulner or the wait for the next opportunity to present itself, and that might be a month later, it might be 3 months later, it might be 6 months later, but then they hit again. But we're continuing to see this. They keep coming back to the well because the well's not dry. Now obviously being sophisticated criminals, they're obviously you can definitely tell they're being cautious, but uh, it's something that hasn't stopped. We continue to see it pop up every few months or so as a new opportunity presents itself. And I haven't seen any signs personally that it's over. Obviously things are changing. There's a lot more roadblocks for them in place, but overall the trend has continued, basically for the last 2 years.
100%. Yeah, that's spot on. And I was talking to someone, I mean, even as of this month, a large organization, that was talking with a system integrator, and they were watching Shiny Hunters extract data, doing incident response in real time, and they only need 10 minutes, right?
Right.
So 10 or 15 minutes, they get in, they get access. One of a few things is happening. One, they're extracting the data and holding the data offline, or two, they're just getting credentials and the ability to go in later when they have
Hmm.
more time, or when they want to actually go after that organization because they've got other
Hmm.
fish to fry. And so it's very systemic, and I think mechanized in terms of how they're thinking about it, and more sophisticated than just a couple of hackers that are that get lucky.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so for those that there's a lot of reasons why folks are joining the call here today with event monitoring. I think some of the things that we hear that are indicative of a problem. And so you have Shield Event Monitoring. That's a great starting point. Um, but it's not enough. You still have to take those capabilities and operationalize them in your environment such that you actually have effective observability and monitoring and the ability to respond to things that occur. And so some of the things that we see, and I'll call out a couple, and then see if Jack anything that you want to go into. But people say Shield is on, which that's a good one. What does that mean? Turning Shield on doesn't actually do anything. You can turn Shield on, and that's a great first step, but you actually have to configure it. You have to deploy it. You have to embed it into workflows. And notification engines for it to be effective. And maybe the other one that I'll call out here is we're backing up the logs in our SIM or offline, which is great
Hmm.
for data storage. It's great for being able to possibly do manual investigation should you identify that there was a problem. But it actually doesn't do anything around proactive anomaly detection and response. And so those are a couple that we hear a lot, and we continue to hear a lot, even for customers that have had event monitoring for a long time. Um, I don't know, Jack, anything else, any other indicators that either are named here, or red herrings that aren't, that you think people should be thinking about, or if their organizations having these conversations, they might be in trouble or eventually in trouble.
Um, yeah, I think one thing that I hear a lot and something that would really challenge people to think about is they'll say something like, "Oh, we have a security team that handles that." Um, and my response back to that is security really should be a shared responsibility. And it may not be your core responsibility, right? Like a lot of the customers that we talk to have a ton on their plate. They're constantly trying to get work out. They're dealing with loads of technical debt and trying to think about security on top of that can be really overwhelming, mainly because they're not security experts. But the one thing I'll just put in your ear is that good security actually helps with operations as well. So there's a reason why teams leverage things like profiles and permissions. And you think, oh, well, that's just because I'm trying to protect my data and making sure SDRs can't access financial information and mess up reporting. But when you really step back, that is a security function as well. Like being able to properly um, permission data is a security function. And so I think teams are kind of doing it already, but when they say things like, oh, we have a security team that handles that. That to me tends to be a really, really big red flag that they're not, they don't have the right mindset for how they should be thinking about their system. And if they don't think their responsibility for security, there may be some other red flags about how they're thinking about configuring the rest of their system. And that's usually not the case, right? Like again, they are thinking about these security related themes. They just don't. They may not just have the most optimal mindset around it.
Yeah, that's a great call, and I think we see, and if we want to go to the next slide, we see with the what's getting in the news on these breaches that is some of the larger organizations that have the most sophisticated security teams, that have the most sophisticated Salesforce teams, and maybe access to some of the SMEs of security folks within their SI community that know Salesforce and security, and they're still
Mhm.
getting affected. And I think one of the things that you're just drawing to mind in terms of, yeah, you can see here some of the other major blind spots that we see a lot is kind of who owns this? So
Mhm.
we acquire event monitoring because we are a regulated industry or because we want to track and make sure that we're capturing activity that's happening for detection and response because of NIST or some other framework, but then nobody owns it, and so it doesn't go
Mhm.
anywhere. Like who should own this, or how should folks be thinking about ownership, Jack?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a complicated conversation that a lot of teams are having. Because if you ask the security team, they'll say, well, Salesforce is their responsibility. We provide guidance, but in general, they're responsible for securing the system. And if you ask Salesforce teams, they say, well, we're not security experts. How can we be responsible for being responsible for it? And so typically, right, like when I think about responsibility for it, I think the best organizations that we've seen just acknowledge that this is a shared responsibility. Both sides of the organization, the security and the operations side, need to be sharing in this. Um, Now, the functional owner, right, like that can roll up to a CISO or whoever owns technical systems, things like that. But at the end of the day, if both teams aren't collaborating, if both teams aren't taking ownership of it, um, if one side isn't holding up their end of the bargain, it tends to not be in a very good spot. So. That's from my experience. That's who's doing it the best. Is the teams that really acknowledge that there's that shared ownership.
100%, 100%, and then setting a process around it,
Exactly.
um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that you can maintain it. And I think that's and I'll just check questions while I'm looking while I'm but so I think that's one of the things is maybe you acquired event monitoring 3 years ago and a
Hmm.
previous team turned it on and built some TSPs and said they were good. But now we're 3 years later, and now maybe you're capturing HIPAA compliant data. And there's a different owner and a different stewardship is required based on the data that you have. And then maybe a different mechanic of how do we assess how are we doing? And to verify that we don't have these blind spots of you're not being able to detect anomalies on our integrations or other connected apps and applications, or not being able to do anomaly detection of what user does. Um, and so setting up the owner and then a process that allows you to validate that you're doing it. And sometimes, audits are a good mechanism for it and a driver. But even audits sometimes don't go deep enough in Salesforce, as we see, again, many of the companies that have been affected have audits
Hmm.
and their audits are successful, but they've still been breached. So I guess as we think about um, a new approach or other ways to do this, obviously with there's a couple of things that we're doing together to mitigate that. And if we go to the next slide, I didn't see any questions. If there are questions, we will bring them up, but we've got a quieter audience today. So kind of a modern approach for observability, really should cover a couple different areas. It should cover both your integrations and connected apps and all the ways that Salesforce is interoperating with other systems in your organization. And then it should also cover, the user activity and, how do you manage what users do and assess normal behavior and anomalies from a user standpoint. And if you have these two pieces in place, and you should be asking yourself this, part of the reason you're here now, if you have these two things in place and you have effective alerting that give confident indicators of compromise, you're in a great spot. And the things that you're learning today are just validating what you've already deployed. If you don't know when new apps are connecting in, and if you don't know if an application that you have authorized has expanded their risk surface, then you might want to think about a better way. And the same thing on users. If you don't know how users, when users are taking data, or if you have any insiders that might have taken data or that you perceive to take data that you weren't able to validate with confidence, then you might want to double click and think about a new approach. And a successful approach, whether you're leveraging our capabilities or not, covers a couple of key buckets. If we go to the next slide. Covers a couple of key buckets. And I don't know if Jack, you want to cover this? Yeah, Jack, so what does good look like? What are the kind of the key gates that a successful operational deployment, whether you're using our capabilities or not, looks like?
Yeah, great question. So, I would say overall, like the first thing is someone needs to be paying attention. And what I mean by paying attention is like someone's watching or someone has some sort of infrastructure set up to alert on when things are going wrong, right? So if no one's checking the logs or no one has again like an SIEM set up with alerting, things like that, then no one knows if it's actually secure, right? So someone's got to be paying attention, and that's sort of what the monitor bucket there is uh, meant to handle. But the big problem with monitoring, right, is like Salesforce is massive. Some of the companies we talk to have thousands and thousands of Salesforce users and hundreds of connected apps. And so trying to manage all of these things manually by going in once a month and checking logs is not really a sophisticated or scalable approach to handling a lot of this stuff. And so I think that's where layering in technology to help alert and flag when suspicious activity is happening, A, reduces the surface area of some sort of impact because you can react quickly and stop it. But and also it just makes it more manageable over the long term. And so that's really where we see teams level up is when they've got that alerting and a process built around handling these things. So, how do you handle new connected apps? How do you handle auditing what they have access to? How do you handle offboarding users? How do you make sure that they're not stealing data as they exit the business? These processes and having alerting to make sure that these processes are being adhered to is also really important. And then finally, just the ability to go in and answer questions about what's going on with the system itself, uh, really helps teams again manage this at scale. So being able to go in and actually answer questions about what applications are doing, what users are doing. A lot of that today with Shield and event monitoring out of the box is really challenging. At least if you don't have a master's in business analytics or something like, it can be really challenging to go through and analyze that data in the raw log form. And so some sort of tooling around that, whether it be BR solutions or something else to help manage that, really uh, really levels teams up when they have the ability to do that. And I think those three things, again, kind of like what ties into ACT there is just being able to have a process, to have standards that you hold yourself accountable to, and then being able to act on them and actually do things with this data, as opposed to finding out a month later that, an account executive stole the entire customer list before they left, or some third-party connected app was compromised and all of your data was stolen. Being able to actually do things with it is also incredibly important.
Yep, 100%. 100%. And I think if we go to the next slide, I just want to be cognizant of time. And we did get a couple of questions that came in. And I think the high level mindset is maybe thinking about reactive versus proactive. And if everything is reactive, if all of your activities are investigation based, then it's too late. The data's already gone. You've already been compromised, and you're in a bad spot. Maybe the organization is in a bad spot. Maybe you personally are in a bad spot. Like if it's investigation based and research in a reactive sense, it's only a matter of time before you're going to be affected. And here we had a question. I'll go through a couple of questions, and while I'm doing that for the rest of the audience, that if you haven't added your questions, we'll jump to Q&A right now to be cognizant of time. So my Salesforce SI implemented Shield. How do I assess my current state? Jack, how would you recommend someone assessing their current implementation status, or are they good,
Yeah,
or are they, yeah.
I think that that last page does a really good job of maybe setting some questions you should ask yourself. Like, do I have proper monitoring? Do I know how to access dashboards that show me this behavior in the first place? If you can't answer yes to that, it's probably not in a good state. If you don't have alerting set up, if you can't answer the question, like we will get alerted if an account executive tries to steal data, or we'll get alerted if an application starts to access data that it wasn't intended to access. If you don't have those guardrails up and you can't answer that question in the affirmative, you might have a problem. And so I would kind of use that previous slide as maybe a foundation to think about answering that question around, if I can't say yes to these things, I probably have some gaps in how these things are configured, and if they are actually set up in a way that the business can build processes around them, as opposed to, yeah, we checked a box in Salesforce setup and it's technically configured.
Right. Yep, 100%. And asking the question, knowing the right question to ask is
Mhm.
super important. We had another one come in. We already pushed our Salesforce Shield logs directly into Splunk. Is this enough, or am I missing something?
Um, it's definitely better than nothing, right? Like having someone paying attention to the data is really important. Something like Splunk or other systems can help answer questions. They're definitely a little bit more intuitive, especially for security teams, beyond what's offered out of the box with event monitoring. Um, but and I think this probably encapsulates a little bit of the problem with the space, is that there's so much Salesforce specific knowledge that goes into understanding what this data means, that actually being able to, again, build a process around it can be really hard. So typically, who owns Splunk? The security team, right? Like they're the ones managing this. Do they know how to set up the right alerts? Do they know what alerts matter? Um, are they able to answer those Salesforce specific questions? Can be really challenging. And so again, if there's not collaboration around this and teams aren't enabled around the information that's necessary to do it successfully, you may be missing something. Whereas, if they do have everything and all of the Salesforce specific stuff is built in, you're definitely further along than most.
Yeah, great call. So we had a couple more questions, but just being cognizant of time, Jack. So for the audience they've joined today, it's great that they're thinking about the situation, or maybe improving their status of how they're managing Shield and observability. Tomorrow or Monday, when they come back into the office, what do you recommend they do first? What's the first action someone should take next?
I would just go in and get a lay of the land. Like, what is actually enabled? What do I have access to? Uh, and if you're in the Salesforce ops side, I think trying to figure out what's important to the business, and then determining what a good next step is. But I think most businesses would agree that their data is important. They need to protect it. But I think a good audit of just what's available today. Do I have everything enabled? Can I actually start to even think about building a process around this information is probably, step one. Just figuring out what we have and where is the current state of our system, because I think a lot of customers go, I think we bought it. And if that's all you know, then there's a lot of legwork to go beyond that.
100%. 100%. Yeah, and if you go through that process of your initial baseline and you think you're in a less than optimal state and you want more automation to assess that, or expertise, obviously we're here. So, yeah, so continue to follow us. Where we have a website, obviously we have LinkedIn, and we want to be a resource to help you all and the market as a whole make progress and less seeing less news about the latest shiny hunters breach at scale,
Yep.
knowing that there's going to be more that come shortly thereafter. And with that, Jack, thanks for spending the time, sharing the expertise. Audience, we're here, so if there's any questions that come up thereafter, let us know. And good luck making progress, and we'll chat again soon.
All right.
All right, be good. Thanks, everybody.